Good afternoon, everyone, and a massive thank you for having me. It's late in the year, and I'm sure everyone is feeling a little bit tired and looking forward to a break. But it was lovely for me to receive the invitation to participate today, and I suppose just give me the opportunity, if I speak personally, to just reflect on the question that was asked of me, and whether I had any insight that I'd be able to share. And the question that was asked was, how future ready are you? And it's something that, I suppose we all ask ourselves, irrespective of what situation or position we find ourselves in the world today, just given how much change and flux there's been. I'm sure also all of us have been forced to ask ourselves this question, and many of us have confronted it and answered it in many, many different ways. And, I think just a very, very simple point to make up front is that everything I'll share with you today will be some of my learnings and my insights, none of which presumes to be a perfect recipe for success, none of which presumes to give one the ingredients for answering this difficult question, but often the points that I'll raise are ones that I've used to help myself personally. I've helped to use our staff, and I've used to help our organization navigate tremendous uncertainty as it relates to the future. And, I was watching a movie the other day, and this is sort of the opening credit scene from it. It's an amazing David Lynch movie called The Lost Highway, and it's very surreal. It's almost like takes place in a dreamlike state, which felt quite appropriate, I suppose, for the last couple of years we've been facing. And this image of this road traveling down this road at speed at night felt very much like the experience of trying to navigate our way to the future. So as I said, hopefully what I can share with you today will be of use, and what it will at least do is present a little insight into how I think and all the tools that we've used to help create an organization that is always learning, that is always looking through the windscreen, I suppose, and never through the rearview mirror. But just an apology up front. And that is to say that I tend to speak a fair amount in metaphor and analogy. And I tend to rely on my own patterns when trying to explain a point. I did just say to the moderator before we rang on that I'm half Italian and half Greek. So I suppose talking in stories and in analogy is probably baked into who I am. So hopefully none of the analogies are lost on you, and hopefully the points that I pull out resonate with you, and at the very least serve as a reminder of what I believe are some home truths. And as I said, at the very, very least, I will share some insight into the journey that we've been on as an organization, or what we've done as various initiatives to help create a learning organization. And when I say kind of learning organization, this was the topic of the speech or the talk as was introed. A huge amount of what we've endeavored to do within TBWA South Africa is to unlearn a huge amount of what we have in the past learned. I tend to find that we very, very quickly default on learned and established behaviors for a whole host of reasons. Most specifically because it brings comfort. And I often refer to some of these things as muscle memory. When I speak about unlearning, I'm always inspired by this quote by Alvin Toffler, who is an author and futurist. And this quote may be very, very well known to a lot of you, but it's often very useful to come back to it. Because as I said, unlearning can be tremendously uncomfortable in a world that is racing as fast as it is racing today. And I'll just read it out. The illiterates of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And as I said, kind of spoke a little bit about muscle memory. And just the first point that I always speak to folks that are joining our agency collective in South Africa, that muscle memory can be your friend, but also your enemy. Anyone who has played any sport will know that often, even like driving a car, let me use an analogy that I think is probably easier to explain. When one's first learning how to drive a car, it's unbelievably difficult. You're asking your brain to do things it's never done before. How on earth does my left foot operate independently of my right foot? How on earth does my right hand, at least in South Africa, we drive on the right hand side of the road, operate a steering wheel, but my left hand operates a gear stick all at the same time? It's incredibly difficult. But quickly, after a couple of months, one gets the hang of it. The muscles take over. The brain has established the connections it needs to do in order to do it. And we no longer think about what our right hand is doing in relation to our left, what our left foot is doing in relation to our right. And it's that muscle memory that brings comfort and confidence. So it's an amazing thing. We apply this every single day in our jobs. We don't question everything we do because we've already developed the answers for ourselves over the course of many years, either operating in the same environment or applying learnings from different environments to our current environment. So it's a very, very useful thing. But it can also be our enemy. And it can be our enemy because we don't ask ourselves questions that we believe we've previously answered. We don't we don't ask difficult things of ourselves because it brings more complexity into our lives. As I said, the world has changed so dramatically, and the world is moving at a pace that brings immense discomfort in all facets of our lives, whether it be personal and professional. So we tend to over rely on muscle memory. But the consequence of this is that we don't give ourselves the opportunity to be uncomfortable again. We don't give ourselves the opportunity to learn new things. We don't give ourselves the opportunity to create new connections in our brain. And I believe that this limits us. I believe that we need to be creating new muscle memory for ourselves each and every day. And not only doing it for ourselves, but setting that as an example for everyone within our organization. So how do we do this? So one of the things that I've learned through many environments in my career, and I've been working for 21 years, having spent a significant amount of time at university, probably actually definitely a few more years than I should have, much to my parents' disappointment. But each of those years spent at university and each of those years spent learning within creative environments has taught me that surrounding ourselves by the same stimulus day in, day out, very often can entrench very established and well-held beliefs, whether they be institutional and or personal. And I was first exposed to bringing in different stimulus and exposing ourselves to different things and to learning new and different things just purely by virtue of having fresh and interesting people around us and me was when I worked for an independent agency in South Africa called the Jupiter Drawing Room. And they hired a performance artist, a chap by the name of Piet Pienaar, who now lives in the United States as a creative director. At the time, he wasn't involved in the commercial creative industry. He was purely a performance artist, and his job was just to be in the environment. He wasn't client facing. He had no specific mandate other than to inspire the people within the agency, and he did this through a host of weird and wonderful interventions. Sometimes by asking you to bring something crazy to work. Sometimes by dumping something weird, wonderful, and interesting on your desk. Sometimes surprising in a good way, sometimes surprising in a bad way. But what he sought to do was to create an environment where the unexpected became expected. And the routine of the 7.5 or 8, or in our world, the 10 or 11-hour workday was something that would always be a surprise. The intention there was to just create new stimulus, to effectively fill up our toolbox. If one thinks about how I always like to think about our set of skills as a toolbox of memories, of skills that we have collected over time through our experience as children, as students, as, in my case, husband, boyfriend, a father, a CEO of an organization, but to augment that with a different set of experiences, to augment that with different skills that I didn't necessarily think that I had, just so that when a question is asked of me within the work environment, whether it be a creative question or whether it just be a question around management specifically, I have a different and expanded frame of reference to draw upon. So I always talk about inviting fresh stimulus, and I always look for opportunities to bring new, fresh, interesting people into our environment. People who are not like us, people who actually are exactly unlike us. Because the more we surround ourselves with people who see the world through exactly the same lens, the more we perpetuate the echo chamber we live in, the more we entrench our widely held views, and the less we question ourselves about whether what we're doing is right or wrong. And I often talk about embracing tensions too. And the world has become a world which seeks efficiency at every turn. We all feel that in everything. We feel it in the conflation of our personal and professional lives through COVID, as we were relegated to operating from no longer from the office, but from our living rooms. As we've come out of that, we've asked ourselves, where are the areas of inefficiency that we can eliminate in our lives? How are we leveraging every second to be more and more effective? As a consequence of that, organizations have sought to engineer tension out of their environments. Now, when I talk about tension, I'm not talking about that toxic kind of tension that creates unnecessary conflict in an environment. I mean tension in the conversation that emerges as a result of diverse views being brought to a table. I talk about tension where two people can't necessarily agree, will debate the topic and arrive at a new and fresh solution as a result of it. I talk about tension in a way that results and creates an innovative environment rather than an environment where everybody is simply agreeing with each other for the sake of expediency. And the analogy I kind of use here is that, as we eliminate tension, it's like eliminating strings from a guitar. Before we know it, we're left with one string. It becomes a very easy guitar to play, but the tune is far less rich and far less inspiring than if we tune all six strings to play perfectly in harmony with each other. So embrace tension. Don't eliminate it out of your system. Don't always seek the shortest route to the direct answer. Always embrace the diversity in the room and embrace the tension that results from that. This is, I suppose, the supporting point to the one I mentioned just now. And I've seen this throughout my entire career, particularly within the creative environment, where diversity should be promoted and we should be creating environments where interesting people with interesting worldviews feel at home, and where their worldviews are able to impact the environment profoundly. So I'll just play a scenario out for all of you that I'm sure most of you have seen. We're intrigued by people who think differently. We bring people into our environments who we believe will impact our environments positively because of the little bit of magic that, as I like to talk, the little bit of magic that we believe they can sprinkle over our organization. But too often, the organizational culture rejects them. The organizational culture simply does not allow a fusing of beliefs between the difference that they bring and the established notions that are dominant within an organization. I often talk about organizations having immune systems, and I hope that the metaphor I use is understood beyond the language barrier. But I often refer to the immune systems of an organization rejecting difference as if it is a virus that is injected into an environment that needs to be eliminated. As leaders and as people operating within the creative field, we need to ensure that we both are attracting and bringing in people who can and will have a profound impact on our environment if we allow them to. And if we're very clear that we bring them in to change us, we bring them in to expand our worldview and to have us think differently about creativity, about problem solving, about how to arrive at different solutions for different questions. And maybe not even how to arrive at different solutions for different questions, but maybe how to arrive at different solutions to the same question we asked them, that was asked and answered yesterday, and was asked and answered again today, and will be asked and hopefully answered in a different way tomorrow. Because the questions very seldom change. It's the answers that evolve and change. And we have to be okay with understanding and promoting an environment where the answers to the same questions are different. I refer to these as beautiful minds. Always, I'm often criticized, not criticized, people who I've worked with have often have often said to me that, Luca, you like crazy. As in, you like different people. You bring You bring a little bit of crazy into our organization, hopefully not because I'm crazy, but hopefully because I see something different in people that I believe can have a massive impact on pushing us forward as a business and organization. And I always hire for aptitude and for potential. Those people that I recognize that magic within. We don't always get it right, of course. Sometimes some of these hires are incorrect. But I'll never let that dissuade me from continuing to seek out the individuals who have that little bit of magic, that little bit of something that I don't believe I have, that little bit of something that I don't believe our organization has, because I believe it'll make us stronger as a result. I always say, I cannot teach somebody to have an aptitude for creativity or for strategy. I can equip them with skills to operate the tools they need in order to bring those to life. But I can't inculcate somebody with the talent that they need to be successful within our organization. And I also recognize that the people within our current organization who are really contributing all they can won't necessarily be the people to get us to exactly to where we need to get to. And that's okay. We don't all need to be revolutionaries within our environment, but we need to recognize where our capacity exists in order to be those revolutionaries, and and more importantly, identify the areas that we don't have and bring those individuals and those skills in, as I referenced earlier with that Robin Williams slide. Mm-hmm. Pretty current. As at last night, congratulations to Argentina for what was a magnificent final, and a magnificent final because of these two superstars on the screen at the moment. They were on opposite teams last night, but their day jobs are in playing for the same team with Paris Saint-Germain. And I often talk about making the investment. You know, we don't invest enough in attracting and retaining the very best talent, specifically retaining the very best talent, I would argue. I think as an industry, we're pretty good at attracting the best talent, but we're not great at keeping them on the inside of our organizations for long enough. And I think that, you know, what is long enough, and what does that mean? And a big shift that we've had to recognize and embrace is that not everyone is with us forever, and that's all right. We often speak about people being with us for a season, a reason, or a lifetime, and different people will come into our organization for different reasons. They'll come into our organization hopefully wanting to make an impact, hopefully wanting to learn something, hopefully because they believe our environment is one in which they can thrive. And some of which, for some people, that will be a year. For some people, that will be 2 years. For some people, that will be an entire career. And that's okay. I don't mind how long people choose to be in our organization for. All I care about is that they have an impact. The most important measure that I hold for myself as a responsibility and as an ambition and as a goal for all of management and leadership across our entire collective is to not make sure that somebody spends the most time in their career with our business, but that everybody who comes into our business spends the best portions of their career with us. And that's an ambition that we don't always achieve, but it's an ambition that we hold true. And it's a very personal ambition in terms of how we build that experience for each person within our organization. We talk a lot about potential and about giving people the opportunity and platform for realizing their own personal potential. If we're successful at creating an environment where each is able to achieve their potential, where each is able to achieve the highlight of their career, as an organization, we benefit by default. And I think often we get that the wrong way around. I think we prioritize the organization over the individual, as opposed to identifying who are the individuals we want to bring in, why do we want to bring them in, what impact do we expect them to have on our business, what tools are we giving them in order to realize that impact, and therefore how are we benefiting as a business and as an organization. Potentially somewhat controversial even within our business is this idea of a notion of competition. And, you know, it's my personal belief. I'm somebody who's pathologically competitive. So forgive me, whether that be in work, in career, or even a game of putt-putt or a game of golf with my son. But I really am born with an inherently competitive spirit. And again, as I mentioned earlier on in relation to tension doesn't always need to be bad. Competitiveness doesn't always mean standing on the throat of your competition. We can work hard, we can play hard, we can want to win, but we can do it clean. And we can do it in a way that continues to uphold our moral standards, both as individuals and as an organization. We want to win. Winning should be an ambition for everybody within our organization. And when I say win, I mean in the small things. Was this a good day? Did this piece of work that we believed in get sold and get made? Did we as a business produce a piece of work that was recognized by the industry? Have we as an agency been recognized by the industry for the excellence in which we hopefully apply every single day? What is our ambition for ourselves? Because I can tell you right now, and we operate within South Africa, and very similar, but also very different market to Turkey. It's not our ambition to be the best agency in South Africa. And I say this without a hint of arrogance, right? Without a hint of arrogance. This is just an ambition and a goal for ourselves. We don't only want to be the best agency within our regional collective across the TBWA world. We don't only want to be the best agency within the TBWA worldwide group. Our ambition is to be the best agency in the world. And that is it is a grand ambition, and it's an ambition that some will say is unachievable, and that's fine. If it's unachievable, that's okay. But I'm not going to let that dissuade us from doing our very, very best each and every day in our pursuit of being the very best organization and business that we can be. If we grow, if we win, our people grow, they win. And that for me is the ultimate measure of creating a learning organization and how an organization can thrive, and hopefully unlearn all of the behaviors that have got them to where they are today. Because there's no doubt that winning tomorrow will require something different than it took to win today, and winning tomorrow will require something very different than what it took to win yesterday. And this is about pushing things on personally. Another story. I'm a massive fan of rugby and a little bit less of football, and I can attribute that to just our national football team not shining as brightly as our national rugby team. But they're often within football and rugby world, they often talk about leaving the jersey in a better shape than in which you found it. And this is really about the responsibility that each individual has to move things on, to ensure that if they are in a role within our business, it's their responsibility for however long they choose to be in that role, to leave that role in better state than they found it, regardless of how good or how bad that state was. It doesn't presuppose that any fixing needs to happen. It just puts the onus on the individual to move it on, to look towards the future, to equip themselves with the skills, either personally or by virtue of the training programs that we'll put in place, either for the individual or for the organization. But it is a responsibility that each has. And it is a responsibility that I hold for our entire business in making sure that we set the environment and set the foundation for that. Often talk about life and career is a journey of learning. And, as somebody who is very fast approaching 45 years old, you very quickly start to, come to terms with the fact that a widely held belief is that your best days are behind you and not necessarily in front of you. And, I think that it's an important thing for everybody within the business to believe, both, it must be a deeply held personal belief. I recognize that not all believe this, but it must be a deeply held belief that each of our individual and respective best days are still ahead of us. And anything that we dream or believe is possible, whether it be personally, picking up an instrument and learning how to play an instrument, picking up a new skill within our work environment, whether it be related to marketing, communications, technology, and innovation, or whether it relates to a different pursuit, writing, history. It doesn't really matter. For me, it doesn't matter. What matters to me is that our organization is constantly learning. And as I referenced earlier, constantly filling their toolkit with new experiences, with new skills, so that when they're asked the question that inevitably arrives as a brief or arrives as a challenge, their frame of reference is greatly expanded. And this doesn't always have to be the result of hard skills. It can be the result of soft skills that have been built over time. So it's a famous quote by a former Formula One race driver by the name of Mario Andretti, and he was a former Formula One world champion. And we've worked with many entrepreneurs in the technology space over the last couple of years. And this was a slide, not the slide necessarily, but a quote that was on a deck that was presented by the CEO of one of the organizations. And I just loved it because particularly in the world today where we are so reluctant to take risks because we're so concerned about the consequences of getting something wrong, we tend to want to be certain all the time. We tend to want to have the answers all the time. And the truth is, nobody has the answers about what the future is going to look like. I have no idea what is going to happen tomorrow. I'm currently on leave, so I hope what's going to happen tomorrow is I'm going to be lying by the pool with the cold drink in my hand. But I don't know that. And I think the more we seek certainty, the more we eliminate the opportunity for doing new, interesting, weird, and wonderful things. So we've got to give ourselves permission to do things even if we're uncertain. We've got to give ourselves and we've got to give our organization permission to trust their guts. And it's something I specifically speak to new staff about is don't always trust your head. Don't always listen to the voice in your head that creates not only self-doubt, but often will question what feels right. I often say to them in their relay, very personal experiences, I ask them to reflect personally on once. I'm sure anyone listening to this talk can reflect personally on sometimes something just didn't feel right, or sometimes something just did feel right. And after some time, they allowed their heads to overrule that feeling that they had in their stomachs. And that decision that the stomach made turned out to be the right decision, turned out to be the decision that the head should have made. But we don't always give ourselves the opportunity to listen to our stomachs. Our stomachs are not wrong. And we should always give ourselves permission and opportunity to listen to our tummies and to make mistakes, because no mistake made has such dire consequences. Every time we endeavor to do something new, every time we endeavor to do something different, every time we stretch ourselves, whether it be successful or not, is an opportunity to learn. And I come back to that metaphor of filling our toolkit with new skills and experiences. And this for me is one of the most important things. This chap was a French rugby player by the name of Jean-Pierre, and he was the captain of the French team, and he played with immense passion. And rugby, for those that don't know, is a sport that is a physical contact sport, and it requires immense bravery. He's currently now is a world famous artist operating out of Paris. His name is Jean-Pierre. And when asked how he approached the game, he said he approaches the game with a clown in the head and a love in the heart. And I always loved that because it spoke to me so purely about how we should be embracing every single day at work. Find your passion and commit to it fully. Find your passion in the environment that promotes your passion and commit to it fully. And play with a clown in their head, driven by an immense love in the heart. So all of that stuff is all Luca's musings, quite frankly, and are a collection of observations, insights, and I suppose tidbits I always remind myself of, and I always seek to remind our organization of, and the people of our organization, and hold myself accountable to delivering on an environment that delivers to each of those. And again, like I said, it's not necessarily a recipe for success that will propel one towards the future. But the one thing I know is it'll create perpetual motion forward. For us, what that's looked like over the course of the last 3 years, specifically, as we've started to create an environment that can learn and grow, that can learn, unlearn, and grow in the way that I aspire to, was realized just 2 short weeks ago when our collective in South Africa walked away with a handful of trophies at what are our annual Agency of the Year award show held by the Financial Mail. And it's not an award show that rewards or awards purely creative success. It awards commercial success, creative success, success in developing greater levels of diversity within an organization, new business success, growth. So it is the all-encompassing award. And what was most gratifying to me were two things. There's a headline at the bottom left-hand side there, which says TBWA, proving to be a master of all at the Financial Mail Ad Focus Awards. And, one of the things that we've been very determined to do as we've embraced our own organizational structure, which is one of a diversified group of specialist companies operating in an ecosystem where we're able to benefit and leverage off of each other, was that we wanted to create an environment that was populated by both incredible generalists and deep specialists. So I've always said that we want to be jack of all trades and master of all, not a jack of all trades and a master of none. So it was really lovely to see that pulled out and recognized at the time. But most gratifying was some of the other awards that we were able to generate on the night. And just to give you some perspective on the TBWA group in South Africa, as I mentioned, we are a diversified group of 6 separate operating companies spanning brand strategy and design, brand experiences, public relations, full service integrated advertising, public relations, and a production team. Now, what we wanted to do in terms of what we aspired to do at this award show was to have that recognized over the course of the evening, and it was immensely gratifying to see the breadth of recognition that we were able to realize. We won on Large Agency of the Year for TBWA Hunter Scott. We won for Medium Size Agency for Grid Worldwide, which is our brand experience agency. Our relationship with MTN, which is the largest telco across the African continent, was recognized as the Partnership of the Year. We were recognized as having the biggest impact across the African continent over the course of 2022. We were acknowledged as being the Group of the Year in South Africa amongst all other groups, and then we were finally acknowledged as being the Agency of the Year. And I only reference these to say that the kind of environment and culture we've managed to build at TBWA in South Africa has laid the foundation for this acknowledgement. As I mentioned earlier, we're an organization that is always looking forward and never looking backwards. So we don't take much comfort from these acknowledgements. We celebrate them because celebrating one's successes is incredibly important, not only for the organization, but for the people who've worked so hard to realize these accolades. But more specifically as validation that the journey that we're on is the right journey. Our journey, however, is an ongoing journey, and it's an ongoing pursuit of excellence, knowing that the destination is never one that we'll arrive at. That we can go on holiday this year, as it is our summer holidays now, and have a well-deserved break. But when we come back at the beginning of January, we start from day one again. And the endeavor to push our business, our organization, our people, and our ambition forward starts all over again. So the responsibility to unlearn everything that we have learned in 2022 starts at the beginning of 2023. Thank you very, very much for your time, and hope that was vaguely useful.
Luca, thank you very much. It's been very inspirational. What a wonderful presentation. And I see that as a leader, you made a big impact because you mentioned the word impact several times, using the potential of the people and supporting them. Just a quick question. Personally, sure. As a leader, what did you unlearn during the last 2-3 years? The major thing you had to unlearn?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I had to unlearn what I didn't mention was that, I've only been a member of this TBWA family for 3 years, and I spent the first 17 years of my life in one agency, save for 1 year. So I spent 17 years in a very, very different kind of environment. Also a large agency group, but very, very different to this group. I had to come into this job with no preconceived ideas of how I would approach organizing this business. I had to come into this role clear on that I'm starting on day one, and all of the experience that I've generated over the preceding 17 years of my life would merely be the tools that I would apply in my new environment. So I gave myself the opportunity and the benefit to get to know the organization, to get to understand the potential of the organization, and to get to apply those skills in a very, very different way, as was specifically relevant to TBWA. No two businesses are ever the same, and no two businesses will ever require the same approach to achieving success, as are no two individuals ever the same. I also had personally been through immense change in my personal life at the time, so it gave me a very real opportunity to say there is each person's career and life is a collection of chapters, and each chapter can operate independently of the other. So again, being very specific and deliberate about merely applying what I had learned rather than overlaying everything and presupposing a destination. And the most important thing was not necessarily coming in and saying, right, this is my 100-day plan, or this is my 3-year ambition. Other than my ambition is for us to realize our potential. How do I go about realizing our potential? I don't really know just yet. And I may never really get to that answer. I'm always tinkering and we're always playing, and I'm comfortable with that.
Wonderful presentation. I'm really glad to have met you. Thank you for your time, and from Istanbul to you, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from now on.
Thank you so very, very much. I hope you have a lovely day. Appreciate the opportunity.